Hello and welcome back to my channel. It is I, Crip13, and today we're gonna do some advanced artifact guide mechanics and tips. These are basically mechanics that the game doesn't really tell you about, and it's stuff you really gotta dig for and look up to know about. I'm also going to give my thoughts on how to decide which artifacts to keep, and the things that we're going over are things that I am aware of, as I'm definitely still learning new stuff about this game all the time. Anyway, let's go. Let's start with the main stats on the artifacts again. So we already know that the feather and the flower will always roll the same main stat. So for the flower, it's always going to be HP, flat HP, and for the feather, it's always going to be flat attack. We know this from our beginner's artifact guide, but there are things about these three artifact pieces that isn't really explained in the game, and you probably won't really notice unless you look that up. So I'm actually going to put up a screenshot up on the screen now. This is going to tell us all of the possible main stats that the different artifact pieces can roll. So the important thing to know here is that certain pieces can get certain main stats while other pieces can't get that main stat. So if we look at the timepiece here, the timepiece is the only artifact that can get elemental recharge. The timepiece is more commonly known as the sands, because if we look at this right here, this is always going to be the same no matter what artifact set it comes from. It's always called the Sands of Aeon. And the same thing goes with the goblet and the circlet. So that's how I'm going to refer to these pieces from now on. So the Sands is the only one that gets energy recharge, and it cannot get physical damage, elemental damage, or crit or healing bonus percent. If we go to the goblet, you'll notice that again, it can't roll energy recharge, but this is the only one that can get extra damage bonus percent. So for physical and elemental damage, your goblet is the only one that can roll this. And then for the headgear or the circlet, it can't roll energy recharge or any of the damage bonus percents, but it's the only one that can roll crit and healing bonus percent. So if there's anything to take from this table, is to know which artifact pieces can roll which main stats. Okay, next I want to show you guys the difference between a 4-star and a 5-star, because there's actually quite a sizable amount of difference when it comes to the rarity of these artifacts. So I'm going to go ahead and put another screenshot up on the screen, and we're going to go over the differences between a 4-star and a 5-star when they are max leveled. So the difference between a plus 20 and a plus 16 when it comes to flat attack is you're getting 80 base attack difference. When it comes to the attack percent or elemental damage, you're going to be getting about 12% difference. When it comes to physical percent damage, you're going to get 15% difference. When it comes to crit rate, you're going to get an 8% difference. When it comes to crit damage, you'll get 16%. And when it comes to elemental mastery, you'll get 48%. When it comes to energy regen, you'll get 13% difference. The next thing to know about artifacts is that some artifacts are considered higher quality than other artifacts, and we kind of went over this in my beginner's artifact guide, but we'll quickly go over that here. So artifacts that roll with more substats are obviously going to be considered higher quality, and when it comes to a 5-star, you can either roll 4 substats on it when it drops, or you can roll 3 substats when it drops. And then when it comes to a 4-star, you can get 3 on the drop, or you'll get 2 on the drop. If you get more substats on it when it drops, that means you'll have more chances to get upgrades on those substats. So obviously the ones that have more substats on it when it drops are going to end up being stronger in the long run, but of course it's all going to be at the mercy of RNG, because even if you have 4 substats on something, but if it all rolls into defense, that's not really what you want. But if you roll an artifact with 3 substats and all of those roll into crit damage or crit rate, that's going to be better. So this is going to lead into our next mechanic, which is substat RNG. So substats have a lot of RNG when it comes to leveling them up, and I'm going to put up that same screenshot we were looking at earlier, and this is going to show us all of the possible substat increases we can get whenever we level up an artifact by 4 levels. So basically there are 4 tiers here, and each time you level up an artifact by 4 levels, it will grab a value from one of these tiers and upgrade that stat according to one of these tiers. And there are separate tiers for 4 stars and 5 stars. 3 stars probably have the same kind of tier system, but it's not recorded in this table, so I'm not exactly sure on that. So let's go ahead and look through how much RNG this is. So let's go ahead and take a 5-star, and if you roll into flat attack attack, then it's possible that you roll either 14, 16, 18, or 19. Obviously, you want the tier 4, so you want 19, but this is all going to be at the mercy of RNG. When it comes to something like crit damage, you can get 5.4, 6.2, 7, or 7.8. So 5.4 versus 8%, that's quite a lot of difference, especially if you roll the tier 4 a lot. The amount of RNG when it comes to leveling up substats is just absolutely insane. So optimizing your substats is going to be pretty much impossible. So we'll want to try to weigh which ones we think are the most valuable. When it comes to the early game, I would recommend that you prioritize getting attack percent and flat attack, because that's going to give you the most value in the early game for such things like 3-star artifacts and some 4-star artifacts that you want to level up. But once you start reaching endgame and you start getting these 5-star artifacts, it's much better to prioritize crit damage and crit rate as much as possible, because that is going to scale much better into the late game. There are also tons of debate about whether elemental mastery and attack is better in the end game, and those debates are still going on, and so we don't really have a consensus yet. I'm of the opinion that elemental mastery is going to be better for certain characters and attack is going to be better for other characters. If you're a character that really utilizes a lot of reactions, then go for elemental mastery, and if not, go for attack. All right, next up, let's start to take a look at the XP curves for all of these artifacts. And I want to help you guys answer the question of how far you should upgrade your artifacts if you're a free-to-play player and if you're just looking for efficiency. So let's go ahead and try to answer that question. For 3 stars, it's actually pretty easy to max them out. It's only going to require about 52,000 artifact XP, which in my opinion is really not that much. So if you're going for 3 stars, you're still in the early game, you can definitely max out 3 stars pretty easily and then use that as fodder for 4 stars and 5 stars later down the road. You will lose out on 20% of the XP, but that can be made up with the 2 times and the 5 times XP you randomly get when you level up artifacts. So when it comes to 4 stars and 5 stars, what is a good point to level up your artifacts up to? So if we just take a look at my graph here that I've created for it, you can see that the curve is not quite linear. It's definitely got a curve to it. And so leveling it up all the way up to max is not efficient and a good idea. And based off this graph, plus 12 is going to be the most efficient way to spend all of your artifact XP. If we take a look at this graph, you can see that it spikes right at plus 12. That's when the curve for XP is going to get more than the XP required to get from 0 to 12. And again, we can take a look at the cumulative XP needed to level up artifacts. So if we look at the 4 stars, to get up to a plus 12, you need about 69,000 XP. And then to get it up to level 16, you need 122,000. This is pretty much almost double, which means you could level up another 4 star with the amount of artifact XP that you needed to get it from plus 12 to plus 16. But of course, you're going to be missing out on the extra percent, but we'll go into that a little bit later. So when it comes to 5 stars, it's going to take 87,000 XP to get plus 12. And then a plus 16 is going to require 153,000. And then a plus 20 is going to require 270,000. So from plus 12 to plus 16, this is a little bit under double. So again, leveling up from 12 to 16 for 5 stars, you could level up another 5 star up to plus 12. And then even more so for plus 16, you can level up another artifact up to plus 16 with the amount of XP needed to go from 16 to 20. And so according to my graph here, since it spikes at 12, it's probably best to stop leveling up your artifacts at 12, but again, I'll just leave that up to you guys to decide for yourselves whether you want to go to 16 or 12, because the idea is the same. I think plus 20 is just a little bit too much, unless it's your favorite character, absolutely your favorite character, and you just want them to do maximum deeps. So the difference between a plus 12 and a plus 16 when it comes to flat HP is 732. When it comes to a flat attack, it's 47, and so on and so forth. You can take a look here. The average is somewhere around 8% when it comes to this kind of stuff. And since it requires pretty much the same amount of XP to go from 12 to 16 as it does from 0 to 12, I don't believe that this amount of percent increase is quite worth that much artifact XP. From 0 to 12, you're going to be getting 27 attack percent versus going from 12 to 16, you only get 7. So that's about 4 times less return for the same amount of artifact XP. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 5 stars. Between a 12 and a 16 and a 20, we can see that the increase is literally the same between 12 to 16 and 16 to 20. It's constant. They're both the same value. This follows the same principle as the 4-star. To go from a 0 to a 12, you're going to be getting 30% attack versus 15% if you go from 12 to 20. So that's half the return on your artifact XP. Probably not worth it, not in my opinion. Now I say this is not worth it if you are at the point in the game where you have started leveling up new characters. If you haven't really leveled up a main team that allows you to comfortably clear all of the domains in the game right now, then you should definitely level up your artifacts as much as you can, up to the point where you can clear the domains easily. And then when you start working on other characters down the road, then level up their artifacts either to plus 12 or plus 16. So I've already mentioned this briefly, but this is going to be my next tip for artifacts. Your goblet is the only artifact piece that can roll bonus damage percent. When you're building characters, you 100% want some kind of damage bonus on your goblet. This is going to be one of the biggest increases to damage since this damage bonus is directly multiplied into the damage calculation formula. And again, with the circlets, since this can only roll the crit parameters, crit damage or crit rate, you definitely want to have crit. Now, how do you make your decision on whether you should run crit rate or crit damage? Well, that's going to depend entirely on your RNG of the substats that you've rolled on your other 4 pieces. So if your other 4 pieces have plenty of crit rate, then go crit damage. And if your other 4 pieces substats have a lot of crit damage, then go crit rate. There are a couple of things that I left out of this video because it's starting to get really long. I still want to go over the calculations of fusing leveled up artifacts into other artifacts, and I want to tell you guys how I decide which artifacts to keep and enhance. If you're interested in those topics, then don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell to know when I get those uploaded. Anyway, this is the end of the video, and I hope you learned something new. See ya.